Being a World War II war game, success in bolt action will depend on a player's grasp of fire and maneuver. In this tutorial, we examine the rules for movement. Before we look at movement properly, highlighting a few associated details will prove instructive. A game of bolt action involves frequent measurement of distances for movement, but also between units when shooting or initiating assaults. As mentioned in the basics tutorial, the officially supported scale for bolt action is 28mm, which means that individual infantry models are mounted on a 25mm base. The distance between two models is always measured between the closest points of their bases. If the models do not have a base, then measure from a core portion of the model, such as its hull or gun breech. Most infantry units are made up of 2 or more models, with the majority numbering between 5 to 10. The distance between two different units is always measured between the bases of the closest models in the units. One very important facet of the game is the fact that players are not allowed to measure distances before making a decision and issuing an order. This applies to movement and shooting alike, so a player must declare their intention first before actually putting the order die down. For example, a player draws an order die and clearly states that their Panzer Grenadier squad is moving in an indicated direction, or their tank is firing at an enemy tank. This may lead to a unit falling short when trying to run to a location or opening fire at a target that is out of range. New players may struggle with this feature at first, but practice and experience will remedy that. Just make sure that you don't try cheeky methods to get around this rule. Purely eyeballing distances will ensure that no disputes will arise during the course of a game. A unit that has more than one model must adhere to the unit coherency rule. This means that each time the unit is given an order, the models in it must form a group, with each member of the group separated from at least one of the others by less than 1 inch. If an individual becomes separated due to casualties, the next order must be an advance or run order to restore unit coherence. The battlefield is a chaotic place. This being a tabletop game, to help keep things clear to all players involved, bolt action has a 1-inch gap rule. This means that each unit must stay at least 1 inch away from any other unit, friend or enemy. The only exception to this is when a unit moves in to assault an enemy unit. And with those details out of the way, on to movement. An advancing infantry unit can move up to its basic move rate. This is usually 6 inches in any direction, remembering to maintain unit coherency and the 1-inch gap from other units. If it advances, it may also shoot.
Open fire!
More on that in the shooting tutorial.
Braucht Hilfe! Wurde getroffen!
A running infantry unit moves double its basic move rate, though it cannot shoot. Note that infantry units can change direction any number of times during their move, allowing them to move around corners, avoiding other units, obstacles, and rough ground. Before the game begins, players should make it clear what terrain features hinder or obstruct movement, and whether they provide cover, and if so, what level of cover. Cover will be discussed in the shooting tutorial, but we'll look at terrain movement modifiers here. This pre-game process will prevent any confusion as to what effect different pieces of scenery will have on the game. Some features on the battlefield can completely obstruct any unit movement. Examples include deep bodies of water, gorges, and steep cliffs. These cannot be entered or crossed, and must simply be moved around if at all possible. There are also certain types of terrain features that are impassable to one type of unit. An area of anti-tank obstacles counts as impassable terrain to vehicles and artillery, but infantry units can pass through, though it might count as rough ground. Areas that hinder movement, such as dense woodland, muddy fields or rubble, can slow unit movement or prohibit it. Wheeled vehicles and artillery can be particularly affected by this type of terrain, unable to move through it at all. Infantry and tracked vehicles can move over rough ground, though only with an advance order. Running is not allowed over this difficult terrain. Obstacles like low hedges, stone walls, ditches and streams present a barrier to movement and often provide cover. Only infantry can cross this type of terrain with an advance order. If all players involved agree, however, you could allow tracked vehicles such as tanks to smash their way through with an advance or run order, though this would count as a house rule. The rules for buildings will get their own tutorial, though generally will block line of sight and count as impassable obstacles that only infantry units can enter. Although roads do not affect infantry or artillery movement, they will allow vehicles to move at double speed when the entire movement activation is confined within the boundaries of the road. Note that this bonus only applies to wheeled vehicles, not tracked vehicles. Vehicles are generally faster than foot-slogging infantry over most types of terrain, but they are considerably less maneuverable. It is worth noting that friendly infantry units can move through each other as long as the 1-inch gap is observed when they end their movement. This freedom of movement does not apply to vehicles, as they must negotiate their way around other units, whether infantry, artillery, or other vehicles. This order represents the vehicle moving at a cautious speed, stopping or slowing down to take a shot at the enemy. This counts as the basic movement rate for the vehicle. Tracked vehicles move forward 9 inches, while wheeled vehicles move up to 12 inches. At any point during this move, the vehicle can make up to 2 90-degree pivots around its center point to face a different direction. These 2 pivots can be combined in a single pivot of up to 180 degrees. Using the advance order, a vehicle may reverse up to half its basic movement, with an option to make 2 pivots. This order represents the vehicle moving at full speed, doubling its basic movement rate. It may only pivot once and cannot shoot at all. Additionally, tracked vehicles must move a minimum of 9 inches, while wheeled vehicles must move at least 12. The Bolt Action Rulebook has a handy terrain table for quick reference as to the various modifiers different terrain types have on unit movement. Vehicles can be given the down order, though, unlike infantry, it does not have the ability to hit the dirt and literally go down. Rather, this order is given when a vehicle's crew fail an order test. In this case, the vehicle must reverse at half basic movement, straight back with no pivots allowed. This represents the crew panicking and moving away from the enemy in a haphazard fashion.
The driver panics and reverses, making for a longer hike for the passengers within.
One particular type of vehicle worth mentioning is the reconnaissance or recce vehicle. These are typically scout vehicles who are deployed ahead of the main force to probe out enemy positions and defenses. When reversing, either voluntarily or because of a failed order test, a recce vehicle can reverse at its full basic movement rate instead of half, provided the enemy is in front of it. Some can even reverse at their run rate if specified in the vehicle's description. A recce vehicle has the unique ability to react to enemy fire if no order has been issued to it that turn. This order requires no order test if pin markers are present on the vehicle in question, as the crew do their best to break contact with the enemy. This ability is very useful with proper positioning near buildings and may cause enemy units targeting the vehicle to waste a turn, as it screams off out of sight before a bead can be drawn on it. An advance order is placed next to the vehicle once it has completed its move. Note that vehicles escaping cannot fire. In conclusion, I'd like to point out that vehicles are more maneuverable in this edition when compared to the previous one. Both tracked and wheeled vehicles have the same number of pivots when advancing and running, and even both get pivots when reversing, which they didn't even get in 2nd edition. Thanks for watching, and make sure to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell to receive news of the next tutorial as soon as it drops.